While everyone was losing their minds with the detailed dive into the Switch 2 a few months back, there was one particular announcement that got me hyped. No, not that one, sadly. No, it was Hamster announcing the debut of Arcade Archives 2, with its first game being none other than Ridge Racer. I was excited because, as much of a shock as this might be, I've never actually played the original Ridge Racer. It's just one arcade game I never came across when I was visiting various arcades during those days. In fact, when I think about Ridge Racer, what comes to mind first and foremost is actually its PlayStation Portable incarnation. Yes, even over the original PlayStation game. Kinda convinced me that now was the perfect time to rectify that lack of knowledge ahead of being able to play the original through Arcade Archives. Right from the start, I can't help but be impressed watching the whole game load in one burst. The Galaxian minigame gives me a little smile, but maybe it's just because it reminds me of watching the likes of Invader Load coming into action whilst loading up some C64 games, which would also do the same thing on the dataset. Yeah, who says I don't get nostalgic at points, eh? I digress though, as there's more to Ridge Racer than the loader game. From the outset, you have the same race choices over that single course as in the arcade original. Beginner and mid-level feature a shorter course layout, the more iconic one, with high level and the time trial run over the longer one. It goes a long way to boosting the challenge, as each successive race ratchets up the speed of the cars, and that influences how you're going to tackle each of them. Particularly I found when it comes to cornering, which brings in the need to drift. It's easy enough to do. Let go of the accelerator, tap the brake as you're turning into the corner. Mastery? Well, that's another story. You'll want to modulate those taps on the controller to straighten the car out. And doing this correctly will preserve as much of your speed as possible and lets you regain control that little bit faster. What's also important is learning when not to drift, as I found the speed hit when drifting might be just enough to cost you the race if you're a little too sloppy. And that's just as it should be. Ridge Racer might take some influence from simulation racing games, but that ain't its goal. It's a fast, breezy, stylish arcade racer, and it feels great nailing those corners, which is what it's all about. But then it's kinda over. The three races, beginner, mid-level and high-level, run a full grid of 12 cars that you'll need to beat in order to win. And winning those, well, they'll get you that experience and get you ready to take on the time trial, which pits you against a lone rival, running at a much higher speed. Winning that though, that'll kick off the credits, and the credits will lead into the real Ridge Racer experience. Extra Mode. Extra Mode adds another set of races. This time, you're racing around the course in reverse and starting midway through the lap. Plus, those mid-lap checkpoints are disabled, so no extended time without completing a full lap. It doesn't sound hard at first, but trust me, without the signage, particularly on the long layout, those twists in the back half of the course can throw you off key unless you've got them nailed precisely and can do it 100% of the time. Is it cheap? Maybe, but I still found it quite a challenge, even after all the time I've spent with it so far whilst grabbing footage for this video. Yeah, I feel I've not quite mastered the extra mode races yet, but that's all part of the fun as far as I'm concerned. Now sure, you might not be thinking that when you close in on a race leader right as they cross the finish line, or find yourself in prime position to take the lead and mess it up by taking a corner wrong, slamming into the wall. Or worse, misjudge your distance to a rival as you're trying to get past them, but crash into them instead. Thankfully, it's pretty easy to restart mid-race, and I know I used it quite a lot, even if a race was almost over and the frustration got to me. Now, I don't know about you, but if that's not a sign at how much Ridge Racer gets into your system, then I don't know what is. This is what shows the passion that goes into converting an arcade game design, designed to take your coins for a few minutes of fun at a time, and adapting it for a home audience, where you're going to be playing it longer, more often, and for longer sessions. The presentation really strikes hard here, as 90s as it is, because it just feels so right. Whether it's traits like the announcer, he'll go from supportive and encouraging as you clear one corner, to being a smart aleck when a rival gets ahead of you moments later. Of course, there's the soundtrack, which really offers that 90s electronic vibe oh so well. Of course though, the visuals are key here, and they may not be up there with what you'd see elsewhere, prime blue sky Sega, but it's still pretty distinct when in action. It's visually striking in all the right ways. In fact, I'd hazard to say that it can be more so at points, as I love watching the time of day shift about in some of the races, especially when it hits the dead of night and all you've got around you that you can see is your immediate surroundings and your close rivals. It really makes those courses feel even more precarious. The unlockables though, that really give Ridge Racer for PlayStation its edge, as there's more than just extra mode to unlock. It might be cute to have a quick blast in Galaxian while it loads, but if you manage to clear out that entire wave, you will get a bunch of extra cars unlocked. If you've got a good eye, you might spot a black car during the time trial racing extra mode. Beat it, and it'll also be unlocked. Does it seem frivolous? Maybe, but it adds that extra spice, which only a home conversion can. You can't really get persistent unlockables in arcade games, well, at least not until the likes of F-Zero's arcade version with their GameCube memory card. Now, before I close up, there is one more thing I want to touch on, and that is the Hi-Spec demo. As part of the development of Ridge Racer Type 4, a few years after this, Namco's devs explored whether it was feasible to hit a full frame rate whilst evolving the visuals and making them more detailed. Sadly, their boffins weren't quite able to pull that off, but they did give us this enhanced version of the original Ridge Racer as a bonus to show some of their results and what they could do. This runs in a high-res mode, actually interlaced display, and managed to hit that full frame rate, while still looking just like the original game. Now, it's worth noting this isn't the complete game package here. You can only run a time trial against a single opponent, or a time attack, which is solo, and that's for both the short and long layouts. Completing all of those will unlock extra mode once again, and yet again, extra mode continues to be as much of a challenge as ever. In fact, I would hazard as far to say that it's actually more of a challenge because of the extra speed and fluidity that it offers. It really makes the challenge so much more dynamic, having that extra smoothness. It feels like a completely different game, and it's incredible that they were able to do this. And I think it's such a lovely little bonus to include on at least the first non-platinum runs of Ridge Racer Type 4. It's definitely worth hunting down. Sadly, even though Ridge Racer Type 4 is available as a digital download for modern PlayStations, this stuff isn't included, which I think is a bit of a shame. It would have been a nice bonus to have that preserved as well. Alas. The truth is, I've had an absolute blast getting into this PlayStation version of Ridge Racer, from learning how each car handles, and using that to master those courses and how best to get around them and when to and when not to drift. Of course, memorizing those layouts in both their forward and reverse layouts, and picking the right car in order to beat each race without pulling your hair out too much. All a joy. Now, yeah, it's not a game with a lengthy number of races and vehicles to unlock, as you'll find with later games in the series, but I don't know about you, but I'm pretty fine with that. There's still enough on board to make it well worth checking out, alongside the arcade original. And I'm going to be honest here, me playing this version now and enjoying it so much has really made me more excited to play that version too, even if it offers less than what you've got here. But I just want to touch on something else before I wrap up. In Space Year 2025, it's pretty easy to disregard home versions of arcade games. for the originals can be easily emulated through legitimate or not so legitimate means pretty easily. And most home conversions, at least those from back in the day, on weaker hardware do tend to suffer, whether it's controls or performance, or just overall polish. Many of my peers who enjoy home computer games will know many of the pains that those bring. But hear me out. Home conversions can take an arcade experience and offer something new, something expanded, and something much more fun. Especially because you're freed from the constraints of having to feed a machine every few minutes to carry on and play. And that's something this PlayStation version of Ridge Racer more than achieves. It takes that core driving action, that frantic racing, and it builds upon it with plenty of options and twists that let you stick around and enjoy so much more. Would I have loved to have seen more? Yeah. But you'd lose the trade-off of having the game loaded in a single hit, which I think is still so neat for so many reasons. But I think I'm going to leave it there, so I guess all I pretty much just want to say here is just to thank you all very much for watching.